Well, Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We're going to do something a little bit different today. I'm going to break this into two segments. And the reason we're going to do that, we're going to get into our teaching in the second half of what we've been talking about. Excuse me while I grab my coffee as we sit back and relax today for a few minutes. I want to talk about the news for a little bit, which I generally stay away from and generally don't pay too much attention to, but there's something very profound going on, and we're going to talk here today is about the bird flu and what's going on with that and how it seems to be rising up and the things that are transpiring with that. And the reason I want to bring it up because I don't want people to become complacent with it and in their preparation. So that's what we're going to go through for the first section of this and talk about this. And you know, there's some things that we can compare it to, and there's some things from the pastoral versus the prophetic realm that have taken place over the last 3 years with, you know, the pandemic. And you can see within that how a lot of people were misled, how a lot of people were told by their pastors that they should go and get their inoculations and whatever you'd like to call that, and you know it's all good, and if you don't do it, you're bad. And what were the three of us saying? Don't do it. Warning, warning, warning. Well, it always proves out to be right. Now here's what we get into with the actual plagues that come to the face of the earth. And we know that this bird flu is coming to the face of the earth, but God does not send a plague to the face of the earth until everything else has been tried. And if you look at the state of North America, I guess we could just call it that, Canada, USA, many other parts of the world too, so don't think you're excluded from it. The UK is horrible for a lot of this stuff too. We're living in times now where Sodom and Gomorrah have completely blown wide open. And not only Sodom and Gomorrah, but also with what happened in Genesis 6 with Noah. And both times, God had no choice but to absolutely wipe things out. And there was no alternative to that. But we're living in a day and time right now where we're living in what was going on in Genesis 6. We're also living what was going on in the times of Sodom and Gomorrah. And it's like we have a double portion of sin going on in the nation. And there's nothing left that God can do anymore because, well, he could do. I shouldn't say it that way. He's tried everything and people just won't accept. And God's not going to tolerate any type of misbehavior, not on the face of this earth. He'll allow it to go on for so long, but sooner or later he puts his stamp on it. And this plague that's coming has everything to do with those things that I just talked about, Genesis 6 and Sodom and Gomorrah. And there's going to be millions of people that are going to die. There's going to be, devastation. And it's not so much just people who aren't preparing or people who aren't believing in God. The only people that are going to be saved from this is going to be those who keep his covenant. You can put up all the food you want. You're going to have these preppers and people that do that, and they've got great resources and everything. But their food's going to go bad. Not all of it, but their food will go bad. It's not going to be sustainable. Things like their resources that they put up for trading, they're going to get pillaged because food's not going to save you. Gold and silver is not going to save you. It's the covenant that's going to save you and keeping God's holy covenant. That's what's going to save you. Those other things are resources that we utilize within that to function. Now, we got to realize that the pale horse is ridden. And we're way further along in this than what most people are willing to even accept. And if you're not paying attention to some of these things, it's easy to get loose. It's easy to get complacent. You know, there was the vision that was had by our mentor about the man holding his child and bringing his child to the pastor and say, "Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you warn us?" One, it's not their job. They don't have the anointing for that. We just proved it when we went through the pandemic. It doesn't fall within their office. And this ties right into what we're doing with Let My Prophets In, to your life, to your church, to your heart. But that's so sad that it's going to get to that extent. But sad on whose part? People are going to turn around and blame God, and yet God has given every opportunity, and He has tried everything out there to get people's attention and get them to turn away from these evil ways and the acceptance of this. You see, you have ministers out here, popes, that are accepting things that are so contrary to the Scripture from behind the holy pulpits, the holy bemas. And that's denying Christ is what they're doing, and denying God's ways. Now, I didn't mean to get into a big preach about this thing, but this plague that's coming is drawing a line in the sand. And if you look at different characters in the Bible, I shouldn't call them characters, call them prophets of the Bible. You look at David. David prepared a people before things happened. You look at Joseph and what Joseph went through, the vision that he had. The dry times are coming. The dry times are coming. There's not going to be these resources. As I can hear the geese flying over my house right now, I'm surprised the shotgun's not going off. But perilous times are coming. They're upon us, and we're in it. And doesn't Scripture say, that perilous times are coming? Doesn't Scripture also talk about, from such turn away? Turn away from these evil things that are going on? There's going to be a mass exodus out of the churches because of some of the evil that is going on within them. From the bema. From the bema. And this is why you're better off not even being in churches that deny the power of God. Deny God's ways. That sounds like a blasphemous thing to say almost, doesn't it? No, but if you look at Scripture and you look at the state in which they're actually in, you're better off not being associated with that sin. Now, when you look at, I brought up Genesis 6, so let's talk about Genesis 6 for a quick second here. Not all the stuff that Prophet Steve gets into. I want to look at the preparation side of it. I say that Prophet Steve because Prophet Steve loves Genesis and Genesis 6 and that whole situation with the Nephilim and all that. Falls right into his wheelhouse as a prophet, as to who he is. It burns in his heart. It burns in his soul, and rightfully so. But God gave Noah very specific instructions how to escape what was coming. He told him what? Build the ark. And Prophet Mike Terry did a thing about building your ark. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes here. But he built the ark. He told him what was coming. He didn't understand what rain was. He told him to gather the animals, get a couple of these, get 7 of these, bring them into the ark. He had a way to take care of the poop from all the animals, from the humans, a way to prepare food. He had a water system. He had everything that he needed to sustain himself and his family. Noah did it all. Noah didn't just store up food. Noah had to plan everything out. Food is only part of it, as is everything else, only part of it. But we've got to do it all. And if you look at doing it all from a biblical perspective, You look in the book of Acts, doing it all. They were keeping the commandments of God and the testimony of Jesus. That's what they were doing in the book of Acts. That's what it talks about in Revelation. Those who what? Keep the commandments of God, which is Torah, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. You'll find all the instructions in there from God to keep you sin-free. But people, well, we don't belong to that. Well, that's a whole other story in that one. But that's what they taught. And did these guys in the book of Acts, were they not saying, if somebody teaches you a different doctrine, run from it? That was their doctrine. That's what God was doing. So what's this got to do with preparation? It's back to the covenant of God. It's the covenant of God that will sustain you. And it's going to be God's children that will pull through it. There's going to be other pagans that pull through it. There's going to be other people that will pull through it. But to guarantee that you pull through it and yours pulls through it, it's going to be you keeping those things, the commandments of God, the covenant, the testimony of Jesus Christ. You see, the problem when plagues come, though, and warnings come, people don't heed to the warnings. And what we went through with this last pandemic, it's getting people a little bit complacent now. Because now you get people talking, and we've been talking about this for 15 or 20 years now, that it's coming. But people are having a hard time taking it serious until it's upon them, until it's actually going. People are going to have a real hard time because they got buffooned once. Is that a word? I think it's a word. If not, we'll just create it. But they got buffooned once, and people don't want to fall for that again. But this is the real deal. This is coming. This is happening. As we know, it's already with this bird flu. It's in the cattle in Texas. One human has gotten it. The big thing that the scientists are concerned with right now is it transferring through one more mutation into the swine. Now the swine, and there is a reason why God says don't eat the swine. The swine is so close to the human biology, the way that we're designed, that if it hits the swine, it's very, very easily transferable into human. It's upon us. And I don't want people to get complacent with their preparation. And this is where we're going to talk today. And just go through a list. Sit back, grab a coffee, have a donut. We have donuts too, don't we? But God will take care of you. If you. He's not going to take care of the world. Like I said, some of them will survive through it. But he's not going to take care of them. We want a guarantee of rate of survival within our life, within our family's life. You know, when you look at certain things, maybe get a pen and paper, maybe make a checklist. What are you going to do with water? You can't go very long without water. I've gone and I've done a 3-day fast with no food or no water. I don't suggest it for anybody. You want to get yourself to the brink of death? Get 3 days without water in you. So you have to have water. You have to have a source. What's your source for water? Your source for water is not turning on your tap. Because if the pump shut down for the town, if the electricity shuts down for your well, what are you going to do for water? What if you've got a water barrel? Maybe you have a cistern which stores water in the ground. If the electricity is out, how are you going to draw it from there? Maybe you need to buy yourself a pail. Like there's all kinds of things that you got to look at from every single dynamic with this. You know, we get into water, and then we get into food. The one thing with food that we're all going to have to learn to do is we're all going to have to learn to fast. And I know most of people are out here know how to fast. You got to learn to go 3 or 5 days or 21 days or 30 days or whatever you'd like to call it. You know what that will do? That will allow your food to be extended that much longer. It will allow you to give your food to your children. And this is already happening in our area that we live in, probably in the area that you live in, where some parents can't afford enough food where they are not eating so that they can already give their food to their kids and make sure that their kids are fed. That's happening. Thank God for His covenant, because God is a provider. He's a providing God, and He will provide for us. When we get into fasting to make things extend, does the flesh like it? No, but we're so far past that, and most of you watching are so far past that. And if you're not, get into it. Get into fasting. Learn about fasting. Learn how your body reacts. Learn how far you can go without food. The body is a great thing that God created. It needs water, but it can go a long time without food. Now, let's look into some very, very practical things. And this is where we grab a pen and grab a piece of paper and just sit down and do yourself a checklist. Now, with food. And I know most people that have listened to us for years are into this stuff. But you get into canning. We are canning, and I was talking to my wife last night as we were having a discussion with a few people. Canning is something that I don't know, put it this way. I couldn't can something from the beginning of the process to the end of the process. And my wife's over here smirking already. But I know every single element within it because I help my wife with every single element. I just haven't put it all together to be able to do it. I help cut. I help in the garden. I help weed the garden. In fact, I told her last year, you're so busy. I said, I'm going to take care of the garden and weeding the garden this year. And I did it for most of the year until it got out of hand. But we have a process that we do, and we can. And if you don't know how to can, contact us. We have people that will do it with you online. We have people that will give you websites of people who we trust that do it properly. And we can help you with that stuff. You can go find it out there yourself if you'd like. So canning is an essential. You can can vegetables. You can can mushrooms, which was a huge failure in this last couple of weeks. Wasn't a failure. What happened with the mushrooms? They shrank so much that the jars are half full. So it's not a failure. But that's just a learning curve that we went through because we were blessed with trays and trays and trays of mushrooms that we woke up one morning and somebody had dropped them off. Somebody we had blessed at one point in time turned around and became a blessing in abundance and dropped off, we're talking almost a half a pallet full. So we had to do something with them. So we had to do that process, but can them so that is sustainable for the long term. Another thing, you can get into freeze-dried foods, MREs. And that's a great resource and probably the most healthy way of doing it. When you can something, you retain about 70% of the nutrients within it. When you freeze-dried food, you're retaining between 90 and 95% of the nutrients within it. And I know that there's people out in Ephraim here that have bought freeze dryers and are freeze drying their food. And it's a great, quick way of getting it done. It's a lot easier than the canning process. Yeah, they may be expensive, but if you look at the sustainability, and if you've been doing it for long enough and you're eating out of some of that stuff and rotating your stuff, it pays for itself. Because food prices are just going way up. And if you can buy it now and freeze dry it, it's a great way of doing it. You can get into canned meat. We have, I know you may not like the fact of, may not be the healthiest. It may be salted. It may have this. It may have that. But it's still sustainable. And that's why you pray over it. But you can get into canned chicken. You can get into canned turkey. You can get into canned corned beef. You can get into tuna. You can get into sardines. You can get into whatever you would like to get into. You can get into what they call prats, which are a type of fish, which I have on hand for when my father-in-law comes over because he loves them, so I make sure that I have them on hand for him. You can get into smoking food. There's ancient ways of preserving food that we still don't touch into. You can get into salting food. That's something that still needs to be taught, and I know there's people out here that know how to do that have been trained by somebody else themselves. You see, but when we get into these things with food, you realize that probably 20 years ago, there was about 3 days worth of food on the grocery store shelf. Do you realize what it's down to now? 1 day. 1 day. There's 1 day supply. If things go really bad, and we saw a little glimpse of this through the pandemic, where the grocery store shelves went completely empty. You couldn't buy a frozen pizza anywhere. You couldn't buy a bottle of Coke. And that's what people did to prepare. It's pretty comical when you look at it. They were preparing for a weekend, which is what they were doing. And this is where people don't have a clue on how to prepare. They all panicked and ran to the grocery stores, and you saw the carts that were lined up halfway around the grocery store, and it was so comical. The carts are half full. And they got their frozen pizzas and their Coke and a bag of chips. That's not going to sustain you very long. Oh, by the way, they had like 80 rolls of toilet paper. But it's ridiculous how some people look at planning. And I know we've been talking about this for so long, and it may seem comical to you, but this is the reality of where a lot of people are. They don't have the covenant. A lot of them don't have Jesus. Some of them have Jesus. But they don't know how to plan. They're so used to stopping at the grocery store 4 or 5 times a week and just get what they need for dinner, or pick up the phone and call Uber Eats. It's a lost trait almost. Preparing for your future is almost a lost trait, but that's the way that people have been conditioned. You see, when you get into food storage, date your food. Come up with some type of a cycling system, some type where you eat off the front, you put the good stuff, the new stuff at the back, and you take off the front. However you plan on doing that. Hey, we learned a lesson from that. I'm sure a lot of you have too. We had some cans that got stuffed at the back, and they were back there for long enough that the acid ate through the bottom of them. It wasn't food that we would necessarily eat. You can't eat 80 cans of big cans of kidney beans that we picked up real cheap at one point in time. And it leaks through. It didn't get rotated properly. Couldn't get through it. There was too much of it. But these are kind of things that you have to learn how to do. Date your food, replace it, keep records. The Bible talks about how expensive that bread is going to get. Like, are you able to see with the rates of inflation, the way that they're going right now? Are you able to see how it's going to take a day's worth of wage? And that's what it talks about in Scripture. A day's wage for a loaf of bread. What's a day's wage? $200-300, $100, whatever you'd like to call it. For a loaf of bread. Well, if we're putting up that stuff now, not only could you use that as a really good trading source and a resource, it would sustain you, but it's also a tradable commodity. Food is a tradable commodity. I'm not saying give away your food. I'm not saying, give it away. I'm not saying trade it away. It's for you. It's for your family. Here's the conversation I had this week with one of the brothers. What do you do if somebody shows up at your door and they're hungry? My answer to that was, after a few days, I'll open up the door. If they're still alive and they don't have the bird flu, I'll roll out a can of soup. There's one. You want the second one? Because I'm not going to waste my food. Because if you're not going to believe in Christ, the Messiah, and you're not going to keep the testimony, the covenant, the testimony and the covenant. You're going to die anyway, is the category that I'm putting you into, because I'm separating the sheep from the goats. And then what happens from there? I get to minister to them. This is why we have what we have. This is why you're at my door, because we do this. Now, if you would like to do this with us, it would be a great time to be able to minister to people. Not to bribe them, but to show them there's a reason why we have what we have. There's a reason why our God provides. God is a provider. He provides protection. But his protection of the 91st Psalm, it only extends to those who are keeping the Holy Covenant. It doesn't belong to the church. It belongs to those who are keeping the testimony, which is partial of what the church does, as Hosea talks about. And then it also provides on the other side of the half-baked cake that's talked about in Hosea. It takes both elements of that. You see, all it takes is one disaster, and this whole thing is going to get flipped upside down. And we're warning you to be prepared. And this is where we got to look at now. We'll get into something else. Yeah, I know. I'm not going to get to the other part. I'm not even halfway through what I'm talking about here. This is the way it usually goes when I get preaching. You know, I'm not a big man of words until I get preaching. All it takes is one big disaster. And this is where we have to learn to manage the current finances that we have, which are going to be absolutely worth nothing one day. This is where we tell you, get your resources, get your money out of the bank, turn it into to silver, turn it into gold. And yes, we have a way that we looked at canning, and we have a way that we do that. We've talked about food preparation. We've talked about water, having a water source. And yes, we have sourced out a way for gold and silver. And if you would like to know that source, Prophet Mike Terry has taken that bull by the horns, and we will put you in a place. It's an arm's length away from ministry is the way that that's set up. Because we don't want to handle your funds. We don't want to handle your tradable commodities with gold and silver, and you give us, and we're not in that business. But somebody else is that we trust. And we have that alignment. If you want to know where to get some gold, get some silver, talk to us. We'll get you in contact Mike Terry, or contact us through the website. And I'll get you in touch with Prophet Mike Terry to get you down that road with that. And this is not a sales pitch. This is about sustainability for you and your family. That's why we do the things we do, not for selfish gain. It's for you to be able to have resources and provision. Now, one of the big pressing things that's been on me, we just talked about the money thing. I'll leave that one alone. Get your money out of the 401ks if you got them in there. Next phase. It's planting season. It's planting season. It's time to go plant the gardens. It's time to get out there and get elbow deep in the dirt. We're already working on our garden. We're working on the rototiller. We planted potatoes yesterday. There's no we in that. The potatoes got planted yesterday. But it's time. The garlic's already coming up. The chives are coming. Things are starting to happen. The buds are coming on the trees. It's planting time. Because when there's planting time, there's a harvest time. And I liked what sitting there staring at the garden, my wife was showing me what she had planted. And I said, so how many is this going to get us? How many potatoes is this going to get us? She said, well, I just prayed and said 100-fold. I said, well, okay, I agree with that. As you're planting, pray for your food. Pray for the abundance to come. You have that right. And I just thought that was neat. I thought that was a quick answer. I wasn't really expecting that one out of her mouth, but not that she doesn't pray. She prays all the time. But it's harvest time, or no, it's planting time. And you will reap what you sow. in every situation of life. Every situation of life. Let's look at something else. Another element that we all have to think about, especially up here. Not so much down south, if you're maybe Florida or somewhere in a luxurious place like the armpit of the Caribbean. You won't have to worry too much about this, but heat. Heat. As you can see, I've got a fireplace right behind me. It's a wood-burning fireplace. It's not a gas fireplace. People often ask me, why don't you put a gas insert in there? No, because what if the gas gets turned off when things get bad? I have a way to heat my house. You know what else I have? I have more fireplaces that are sitting in my shed. Well, what are they doing in there? Well, I can knock out a window and I can run a pipe through there and vent it out. We have guys who have went and bought economical diesel heaters that they burn anything you want to put in them. And they're very, 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 very efficient. You can put used motor oil in them. I've got a couple of them. Will I use them? Probably not. But when somebody comes knocking on my door and says, we're cold, we need some heat, that's why I have them. We have provisions that aren't necessarily just for us. But somebody might have a gap in their preparation. And what are we supposed to do? Fill those needs. And if you see the need, you fill it. Oh, does that mean give away all your stuff to everybody? No, it doesn't. Who was Jesus sent to? The lost sheep of the house of Israel, most of which is out here found within the church. But what if the gas gets turned off? What if the furnace doesn't work? What if your propane runs out? Like, there's all kinds of different elements. We've got to prepare for a year. But do you have a year's worth of firewood? I know where the firewood is at for a year. Plus, I know where to source it. And it's not going by it somewhere. I know which ditch it's lying in that I can go cut it out of. I've got stacks and stacks and stacks of firewood over here by my house. Is this about me? No. This is about what we're doing to prepare. And these are things that we've been through for 15 years to get people to look at it. Another thing you could look at is a corn stove. May not be that cheap. They sure do burn good. But you'll need about 100 bushels of corn to heat your house for a winter. Is that economical? Maybe in your area it is. Maybe in my area it's not. These are options that we've got to look at in sources. What if the electricity goes out? What are you going to do? Can you cook? Can you heat food up? Questions. You have a means for a fire? Maybe you need a torch? Maybe you got a kerosene stove? Maybe you got a propane stove that you can, hot plate that you can use? Butane? These are things that you got to look at. And people have to look at. You see, because you're going to run through situations and you're going to get gaps in your knowledge because we've never been through anything like this before. What's coming to the face of the earth, no man has ever been around this kind of stuff that's alive. Not even close to it. It's going to be devastation. You see, when we come to, just reminds me of another conversation I had this week. You know, you're going to have the means to be able to go into some of these places where people have vanished or expired and take some of their resources too. Have you thought of that? Because that's going to happen. So now comes into a thing of what we like to call fishing rods. We'll just leave it at that. You'll figure it out. And fishing lures. Because you can retain anything that you can defend. You can have 5-6 guys take over a food processing plant as long as you can defend it. Think about that. Now, who are your 5 or 6 guys? Think about that. Who can you trust? Who can you trust? It's usually the good old boys. It's usually people who are looking at this stuff already. They may not even be necessarily Christian. Well, that contradicts what you just said. I told you some people will be sustained out of this. Why? Because you need them. This is all about the Father and all about the Father's kids. But it's those of us who know our God. So look at a few things here. Let's get back to, I got a list here now that I want to go, how are we doing for time? Oh my goodness. We're going into a deep recession. Talk economics for a quick second. And things are getting harder and harder for people, and people could be sitting there saying, I can't afford to do any of the stuff you're talking about. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. You can afford to keep the testimony of Jesus Christ. You can afford to keep the covenant of God. That costs you nothing fiscally, financially, monetarily. The only thing that costs you monetarily is your flesh. And the one thing that people don't want to give up. That's what's going to sustain you. Now, I don't want you to lose focus of that. But you can grab a can of tuna and put it away, throw it under the bed. You can do some of these small things. God will honor your effort. What did it take to feed 5,000 men and their families? 5 loaves, a couple of fish. Those times are coming back around if you do your part. But things are going to go from bad to worse. So let's look at this thing and let's get into, I've already talked about a lot of these things, but freeze-dried food, one of the most nutritious ways. You can get into smoking meat. I know that there's guys out here that smoke meat. You're going to need some comfort foods. We have candies that we put away. We have chocolates that are hidden that I find every once in a while. I don't eat a lot of chocolate, but when I do, I eat chocolate. You need some dairy products. What about some dried milk or powdered milk? Well, I don't like that. You're going to like a lot of these things that you don't like now. You'll like it then. What about your freezer? Have you ever thought of this? What would you do if your freezer went down? We've got 3 deep freezers. You know what they're for? Storing food while we get it put down. Permanently. I look at the freezer as a temporary thing. We've had, over the course of our 32 years of being married, 3 times where the plug has come out on the freezer or the breaker got shut off or something like that, and we've lost a complete freezer full of food. 3 times it's happened to us. What if the electricity's out? You've only got so much time to do something about those freezers that are full. Like I said, we use that to cycle food in and stores it and back out. Or we keep the hamburger patties in there so temporary, we can come out, we can cook it, and we have a means to be able to cook 2 cows like that if we wanted to. Think about those things. Think about those things. What about generators? There's some really efficient generators out there, but they take fuel. Well, you might need some fuel. You might need a generator. You might want to get one. You might not want to get one. That's your choice. Canned food. Buy cases of it. You can get a discount on it. What it comes down to, and where I'm getting this from, this is a blog that Prophet did a long, long time ago. And I took notes a long time ago on just off the blog. This isn't from the preparation CDs. This is just off a blog that was done. But get off your butt and do something. Right back to where we started with complacency. If you don't think that there's some type of a crisis coming, what do you lose by doing any of this? Nothing. If you don't want to believe me, you're not going to lose anything by doing it. I'm not asking you for anything. I'm not asking you to give up anything. We're giving you preparation, hints, tips. Not telling you to do anything. Giving you multiple different things. But there's a crisis coming. We're getting closer and closer every day. But it's going to be that remnant. The remnant that are under the covenant of God are the only ones who will have a guaranteed way of escaping. Why? Because this was prophesied. This was prophesied. Contrary to most of the charismatic and contrary to some of the belief out there now, you need a prophet. Not a prophet, Phet. You need somebody who would stand there and say, with a pandemic, no, 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 no. Don't buy into it. Don't take the foreign manna. And this one, we're saying, yeah. It's coming. It's going to happen. This is what you need to do to escape. Noah had to prepare. Joseph had to prepare. We have to prepare in order to make it through the things that are coming. Now that went a lot longer than I thought it was going to go. I didn't want to get into all that the way it did, but it's not my choice. I don't make the rules. I just open my mouth. Prepare. If you want to know any more information, by all means, contact us. We'll get you in touch. We have some really good resources. We have people who know how to hunt. We have people who know how to garden. We have people who know how to farm. We know people and have people in the organization who know how to raise chickens. Oh, get yourself some chickens too. At least you'll have eggs. Get yourself a rooster so that you can have chickens, because when they come around and want to slaughter all the birds, better have a rooster. I'm not going to make a joke about that. But make sure you have these things. But we have these resources and we have talented people. You want to know how to make a windmill. You want to know about solar. There's different resources out there that we have people who have been doing this stuff for a long time already. Get in touch with us. Get in touch with us. But the biggest thing is, know what you have. And the bigger thing is, know what you don't have. Know where your gaps are. You know, when the pandemic came around, we didn't go to the grocery store for about a month. We ran a little test. And we found out where our gaps were. We hope you took the same thing too. I don't want to be around there with, people fighting over toilet paper and arm wrestling over this and fighting. No, we had sustainability for that long. On the short. But know where your gaps are. Pull out your paper. Go through your food stores. Know what you have, know what you don't have. Look at your plate when you sit down for some of you are probably eating breakfast right now. What do you have on that plate? Look at your plate at lunch. What do you have on your plate for lunch? Do you have those resources to remake it? Look at your dinner plate. Do you have the resources to make that? A couple more things, and then I'll wrap up. The natural things that God has given us. I mentioned earlier there was geese flying over. And I've said I'm surprised the shotgun didn't go off. I wasn't talking about the neighbor. I was talking about my son. Because hunting is a great resource for food. Fishing is a great resource for a lot of different kinds of food. You ask anybody who's what would you call them, like a naturalist or somebody who's lives off the land, and if you gave them one choice to live off the land or the ocean, if that's all they had the resources, they would all pick the ocean. There is such a huge resource there of food. You get into the plant life that's in there. A lot of that's edible. Obviously the fish. You can live off of that. The salt that it brings to you, that we all need salt. Remember what was it, 25 years ago? Don't eat salt, don't eat salt, don't eat salt. We need salt. But hunting and fishing, make sure you have a fishing rod. Make sure you have some knowledge maybe on it. Maybe you need some to know where to get some of that stuff. Maybe you need to buy a bow and arrow so you can, when the deer walks through your backyard, you can take it out and you have a meal for the community. Like small things like that. Well, I don't like looking at things like that. Well, you're not hungry enough yet. That's what it comes down to. You're not hungry enough yet. Most people who talk like that have never gone 30 or 40 days without food, fasting, and know what it's like. Push themselves to the very limits of life. You'll eat anything almost kosher. But those are resources that maybe we got to look at having. And if you want to know about those things, we have people who are into hunting. We have people who are into fishing. We have people who are into bow and arrows. What gun you might want to buy to shoot? It's not hard, people. It's not hard. Resources, once again, to sustain you from what the Father has given us, from what He gave to us. Look at your lawn. Look at your lawn. You know what season it is right now? Dandelion season. You know what they're good for? A lot. A lot. Go get me one of those jars. Why do I say a lot? Because you can can these things. You can steep it. You can make a tea out of it. You can make a syrup out of it. It's dandelion season. It's harvest season at the same time as planting season. It's funny how God has this whole cycle that rolls through where you can plant some stuff, you harvest some stuff, but these are resources that we put up. And guess what we're having today for a snack after service? My wife made food, and she used the dandelion as the sweetener. I told her, I said, don't tell anybody until after. Well, I guess I just blabbed it out, sorry. But these are resources. So I'm talking about the lawn. There's all kinds of stuff within your lawn. Stay away from the roundups and get that crap off. Don't spray. Keep the dog off it, maybe. There's yarrow out there. There's all kinds of healthy things that are just naturally growing. It's a resource. Go find it. Maybe you don't want to pick it. Maybe it's in a ditch somewhere. Go find the ditch so you know where to go. I'm not saying you have to eat it right now, but know where your resources are. Know where you're going to go for those times when those times are in need. These are just tips. Tricks of the trade. But find this stuff out. But again, we have people who know a lot about that stuff. A lot. We didn't even get into the health side of it. There's a whole other thing that we can do with all that too. We know people who are into that. And and have people within the organization that are talented in that. God has given us everything that we need to sustain ourselves, including knowledge. Well, that's where we're going to end it. I just want to tell everybody, I didn't open in prayer. I'm not going to close in prayer because it wasn't a sermon. Have a great week. Take it to heart. Go through your stores throughout the course of the week. Look what you got and look at what's empty in the gap that's there. Have a blessed week, everybody. We'll see everybody next week. Same time, same place. We'll get back on track with what we were talking about.